Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let me open this debate organized within the framework of a partnership between SOCIEUX and the OECD Development Center. Let me start this word of introduction by recalling what is a strong conviction, which is that there can be no sustainable growth without inclusive growth, which is actually not a personal point of view. I mean, that's the results of the studies conducted for the last 30 years of interplay between income distribution and growth, between income distribution and poverty. And if we want to reach the goal of reducing poverty, SDG 1, we need to encourage public policies that should ensure a pattern of growth such that the benefits of this growth are widely shared across households. So that's the purpose of an inclusive growth strategy: identify policies that will fundamentally alter the distribution bias of growth while maintaining a long-term growth. And that's exactly what social protection actually is for. And universal social protection, whose leverage effect is manifold, is key to sustain inclusive economic and social development for individuals, for communities, and for nations. Unequal access to social protection implies higher general level of inequalities. So unless that we can set up systems that build resilience to protect individuals against life accidents or economic crisis, we'll probably have many vulnerable households that may slide right back into poverty. More efforts are needed that the right to social protection becomes a reality for all. And today we know that in many parts of the world we have significant progress to make. 55% of the total population is still excluded from social protection. And the most vulnerable part of the population are children. Europe has a long history of social protection and has identified this issue at global level many years ago. And amongst the different actions taken by EU and member states, the SOCIEUX program for European Union expertise on social protection, labor, and employment is one of the most ambitious. It has been established, co-funded by the European Union and the government of Spain, Belgium, and France, and with the support of different organizations in these countries, including Expertise France, and our partners, which I thank, of course, FIAP, the Belgium International Cooperation on Social Protection, and the Belgium Development Agency, ENABEL. So it has been conceived as a flexible instrument for technical cooperation and technical assistance for developing countries, and that illustrates, I think, the strong commitment to the European Union to promote universal access to social protection. Now we have more than 40 partner countries across the world with 150 requests. So I think that that's a good example on what we can do to mobilize the best European practitioners for all member states' public administrations. And now, with many years of implementation of the program, it seemed to be the right time to explore not the question of how to expand the focus of social protection to include the issue of inclusive growth and to achieve SDG 10, but also how to to unlock inclusive growth through universal social protection. So for this debate, I'm really glad to introduce our distinguished panelists from the International Labour Organization, from the Institute of Informal Economy of Bogota, Colombia, from the Indonesian Ministry of National Development Planning, the LIS Cross-National Data Center in Luxembourg, and the Belgium Federal Ministry of Social Affairs. And I will now leave the floor to OCDE Dev to moderate the exchange between the organization. And I know it's the end of the day. I know we're all tired. We all had a good day of ideas, but let's keep it vivid and dynamic. And I think the issue is really at the heart of these ODD day, of these EDD days today. So I really wish we have a very good and productive debate. And thank you for being here. Thank you.
Many thanks, Jeremy. Slightly disrespectfully, I'm moving your... Vivid and dynamic are two words that people really use for English people, but nonetheless, I am your moderator this afternoon, and I will try and do my justice to what is an extraordinarily good panel here. I would like to congratulate you for finding this session. It's a bit of a secret one because it wasn't on the app, and only the true fans have made it, and as a result you'll be rewarded with wisdom and wit and intellect from panelists and not from myself. I make that very clear. But I would like to start. Jeremy has already introduced the organizations, so I won't go through that again, but I will just introduce the speakers, and then we will go straight on to business because these sessions are short, and as I say, they have 5 excellent speakers whom, they have traveled a long way in some cases, even from Luxembourg, and I would like to give them the very most opportunity to exchange with us. So my first question is to Audrey Le Guébel, who is with the ILO office here in Brussels, covering the EU and Benelux countries. Her favorite film is The Usual Suspects, and I'll explain why that's relevant later. Or maybe I won't, who knows. But my question is, as a good opening, as what actually is universal social protection? It's a term that we use as practitioners a lot, but it's not universally understood in the same way, ironically. And there are already some different understandings around the term of universal basic income. So it would be very helpful just to have an introduction to what is universal social protection and how a universal approach can reduce inequality as well as poverty. Audrey, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Alexander. And thanks for providing the ILO the opportunity to be part of this debate this afternoon. The question may sound very easy, but in fact it's always very complicated to define social protection. So I will try to make it very simple for the ILO as well as for the world community. Universal social protection refers to a set of integrated policies and programs that are designed to provide income security and support to all people across the life cycle, and it's especially targeted to the poor and the most vulnerable. So this concept was enshrined in international human rights framework, notably the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where Article 22 says that everyone, as a member of society, has the right to social protection. Then I will obviously mention 2 major ILO instruments that really set the scene for social protection. First, the ILO Social Security Convention, Convention number 102, and second, the ILO Social Protection Floor recommendation, which really provides recommendation on how to set those systems. It was passed in 2017. Those were really cornerstone in developing the concept of universal social protection. And the objective of universal social protection is really to provide an income support, but not only just to provide support, but to build resilience to shocks and to enhance the productive activities and productive capacities of people. So it's more than just providing an income. And in recent years, many countries have really achieved significant extension coverage. This is done through different processes. First, there is the horizontal expansion of social protection, meaning the range of people covered through social protection is being increased. This is called the horizontal expansion. And then we speak about vertical expansion, which means that the range of the benefits are increased, meaning the number of risks covered step by step can be increased, and the benefit level also can increase. So this is really a gradual approach that countries should take when setting their social protection system, so that it remains affordable, of course, for the countries. And one important aspect also is to ensure adequacy of the system, making sure that the right people are covered and that the provisions are sustainable and can be afforded. This, by definition, brings social and economic development. And most of the time, social protection, especially by development community, is seen not only as development assistance, but rather as an investment, because you invest in human capital, and therefore people are less in need now after this kind of assistance for basic support. Recently, there was an alliance that has been set. It's called the Global Partnership for Universal Social Protection, and this is an alliance of development partners, countries. Many of those are here today. Expertise France, Belgium, OECD is part of it as well. There are many countries, and countries also that have committed to it, such as Indonesia. Colombia is making efforts towards it as well. And the objective of this alliance is really accelerating progress in building a sustainable social protection floor. This is really in the spirit of the 2030 agenda, and especially target 1.3, which is to implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including floors, and by 2030 achieve sustainable coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. I will turn to the second part of your question, more on poverty and inequality. First, I mean, in terms of poverty, by definition, social protection is seen as a way to prevent poverty, because by protecting people from adverse financial consequences of the life cycle, they can achieve better life. Some studies have shown that investment in social protection create a reduction of the number of the percentage of the people living with less than $3.2 a day. So there is a direct correlation between the two. In developed countries, we've seen also that the provision of this the provision of these schemes has half the number of the population that is living in poverty. And in developing countries, we've seen that an enhanced access to social services, such as health, education, nutrition, liberates also people from poverty and deprivation. And most importantly, it also helps break the cycle of intergenerational transmission of poverty, meaning that even though some population can be from very difficult setting, the provision of such system can help the children do better than their parents, in fact. The link between social protection and poverty is rather clear. With inequality, the link is a little bit less obvious, but I will try, but it nevertheless exists, and I will try to explain it briefly. I mean, it reduces income inequality, of course, by the fact that through the transfer of taxes and redistribution, people have access to income, and therefore the difference between income is less important within countries. But in fact, it's not sufficient to set in place narrowly poverty-targeted programs, and we should look at the entire population and the way individuals relate to each other. Because social protection is really a matter of redistribution, of risk sharing, and of solidarity. It's not only a process from the rich to the poor, but it should be looked in a vertical way, from the healthy to the sick people, from the families without children to the families with children, and from the working age to the older people through the provision of pension. Another aspect of it that I really would like to underline is the link with women empowerment and gender equality, because through better access to education, nutritional improvement, access to healthcare, social and reproductive health, women can have access to more, they can participate better to labor market and therefore have better access to decent employment. So this is key, in my view, also to achieve better equality. But on that, I mean, just a point. I mean, we should not design programs that follow the track of gender stereotypes, meaning that, for example, childcare should be designed in a way that it's not the responsibility of women. I mean, again, I mean, it's a question of making sure that the whole society there is solidarity among the society, and that the risk is shared among women and men. I don't know if I can carry on or if I should stop here.
Yeah, I think you can save some for a bit later, because we can now move on straight. Actually, I think this feeds very well into what Teresa Munzi is going to tell us. Teresa is the Director of Operations at the LIS Cross-National Data Center in Luxembourg, and she might, Teresa, you might say a word about what that does. And then about what the work that the LIS has been doing for a long time now tells us not only about poverty and inequality in developed and developing countries, but also about the importance of social protection.
Thank you, Alexander. Yes, at least, as Alexander was saying, we have been for a long time, we have been collecting and harmonizing data at the household and individual data level, so micro-level data on income. And the purpose of this is exactly to analyze income distributions across countries, so to make this data as comparable as possible, to look at differences across countries. So the introduction of this panel starts by saying that the global poverty rate fell from 36 to 10% within the last 25 years. Yes, absolutely, there's no question about that. Economic prosperity in many regions of the world have allowed many countries to come out of poverty, but this, unfortunately, has been very often to the expense of a rising inequality. And this is exactly what we are trying to do with our data, to try to understand the link between those two and to see how much inequality indeed has increased. Inequality has increased because, gains of economic growth, unfortunately, especially at the beginning, are always more accentuated towards the top end of the distribution. Only a small portion of the population gets them. Later on, theory tells us, some of you may be familiar with the Kunetz curve that relates income growth with inequality. Later on, with some more development along different areas and not just the economic one, inequality tends to go down again. At the beginning it goes up, and then at the end it goes down. Well, that's what the theory tells us. In fact, if we look at the static picture of today, in here I have ranked all the list countries, so the countries that are part of our center, in increasing order of inequality. So you have to look at the darker portion of the bar. You can see that the middle-income countries, which I have colored in red, using the World Bank definition of middle-income countries, they tend to have much higher inequality with respect to the high-income countries. That goes in line with what we were just saying at the beginning. With a lot of economic growth, like these countries experience, inequality rises enormously. But one should be a little bit more careful than that at drawing this kind of conclusion. And the latest trends in inequality don't necessarily support this theory, because we are seeing that also in high-income countries, inequality, actually especially in high-income countries, inequality is now rising. It's in middle-income countries, the trends are less clear. Some of them, mostly Latin American, for example, inequality seems to be rather decreasing than increasing in the last decade or so. In other ones, like India, China, it's clearly that there's a steep increase, and yet other ones where there's no clear pattern. So this link between economic growth and inequality is no longer clear. It goes a little bit all over. It's obviously there are other factors that came into play: globalization, openness of trade, and technological advances which have somehow disrupted the economy, which may have disrupted this link. But what we can clearly tell now, one of the conclusions, my first conclusion is that the rise in inequality is, especially in some parts of the world, was not necessarily predetermined by the economy, by the economic growth, but it was somehow, it reflected somehow the policies that were existing in place in every single country. That's why there's different trends in different countries, and independently of the growth. So that shows us the importance of social security, of policies, and more specifically social security. And here I would like to come back again to this chart. And now, can you please have a look at the other part of the chart, so the lighter bar, or sorry, no, still the first one. I'm not sure, yes. If you look at the total height of the chart, you see that middle-income countries and low-income countries are no longer so much differentiated. And the higher bar shows inequality according to private income, and so before taxes and transfers, before the intervention of the government, before the public transfers. So that tells us that what really makes a difference between the high and the middle income countries is indeed the intervention of the state. So the transfers and the taxes in this case. So that's a clear sign that the state plays a fundamental role in fighting inequality, and it's not the economic growth that makes it. But which kind of social security policy? Not all types of social security policies are right and address in the same way inequality. If we move to the second slide, what we try to do here, these are actually relatively new results. We just tried it specifically for today. We tried, well, in this chart, middle-income countries are to the left and high-income ones are to the right. Within each part, they are still ranked according to inequality, from the lowest to the highest unequal ones. You can see that, what we have tried to do is to identify the contribution of each type of social security benefit to the inequality, to the redistribution of the income. So a positive bar means that the contribution is beneficial to fight inequality, whereas a negative bar means that it's not beneficial in terms of fighting inequality. Now you can see that universal benefits together with the assistance ones, so all the ones that are blue, dark blue and light blue, typically, or in most of the cases I would say, have a very beneficial effect in order to fight against inequality. Whereas insurance ones are more often than not, they're having a not beneficial effect. Why does that happen? Well, that happens because if you think about who receives the benefits from insurance, typically those are people that are already in the middle to upper part of the income distribution. So that doesn't necessarily fight inequality as such. That doesn't mean to say that insurance systems should not exist. They are fundamental and critical for the redistribution across the lifetime, and every country should think about insurance systems. But specifically for the purpose of fighting inequality, universal benefits and assistance benefits, so benefits targeted to the poor, are clearly the ones that have a much higher effect.
Thank you very much. And I would like to emphasize that slide is brand new. You're the first people outside me and a couple of others who have seen that slide. So, as I say, you're really lucky. I'm not going to let you go. Thank you very much, Teresa. You mentioned that we've seen these different patterns in global inequality, and Latin America has been a success story in that measure. Since 2000, there's been a significant decline in inequality and poverty, indeed. But what we've seen recently in the last 2 or 3 years is a worrying trend of poverty and inequality increasing. And this is also the case in Colombia, where we are very fortunate today to be joined by Gladys Valero Vivas, who is the director of the Institute for the Social Economy in Bogota, the capital of Colombia. Gladys, it would be excellent to hear why poverty and inequality are suddenly rising again in Colombia, and even in Bogota, even though it is more affluent than other parts of the country. And also what your institute is doing to combat this trend. Could I just say that Gladys will be speaking in Spanish. There are earphones at the back if you would like a translation. But Gladys, please start.
Bueno, Muy buenos días a todos, muy buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Efectivamente, Bogotá ha tenido un incremento en 0.1 en la pobreza extrema, mientras que su pobreza monetaria se mantuvo en el 12.4% y la pobreza multidimensional realmente disminuyó en 1.3%. Colombia es un país de 45 millones de habitantes, mientras que Bogotá es de 8.1 millones en Bogotá. ¿Y a qué se debe ese crecimiento de la pobreza extrema? Precisamente Bogotá ha venido sufriendo el conflicto armado. Tenemos ahora otra problemática que se aúna, que es toda la migración de los venezolanos. Hemos tenido más de 1.200.000 de venezolanos que han migrado hacia Colombia. De eso, el 22% llegan a la ciudad de Bogotá. Igualmente, por el desplazamiento de víctimas de conflicto armado en los últimos 3 años, hemos tenido más de 300.000 víctimas que se desplazan hacia la ciudad de Bogotá, al igual que todo el proceso de paz que ha hecho que más de 12.000 víctimas se hayan querido reintegrar a la sociedad. Y Bogotá es el centro donde tenemos más afluencia. Eso impacta el tema del empleo, eso impacta porque además son personas que no están dentro de la legalidad y que, impacta lo que es salud, educación, pensión, y por eso Bogotá, ha tenido ese crecimiento en la pobreza extrema. Aquí lo importante es lo que hace el Instituto para la Economía Social. El Instituto para la Economía Social atiende a población altamente vulnerable que recurre al espacio público para poder el sustento. Cuando hablé de estos indicadores de los migrantes, muchos de ellos, en su mayoría, el 80% de esta población vulnerable, recurre al espacio público como una forma de sustento. Nosotros, a través del Instituto para la Economía Social, hemos venido diseñando y trabajando diferentes programas para empleo digno, para el emprendimiento social para adultos mayores o con alguna discapacidad, para reubicar en diferentes sitios a esta población. Le estamos también trabajando con esta población y además con SOCIEUX, que ha sido un gran actor estratégico para nosotros, porque venimos trabajando en un modelo de atención integral hacia la protección social para esta población, que en su mayoría más del 51% de población que está en el espacio público son mujeres, madres, cabeza de familia, adultos mayores. Tiene una población que tiene un nivel de escolaridad en un 75% que ni siquiera ha terminado el bachillerato. Igualmente tenemos una población adulta, apenas un 26% son jóvenes. Entonces nos dimos a la tarea con este modelo de atención integral hacia la protección social con SOCIEUX de diseñar unos programas como la formación a la medida con componente TIC, porque hay madres que pueden trabajar desde su casa. Igualmente estamos trabajando en empleo digno con diferentes actores, vinculamos al sector privado y al sector público para generación de empleo a esta población con este nivel de educación. Hicimos un diagnóstico previo para saber cuál era esa demanda y oferta de empleo para poder cerrar la brecha y vincular a un empleo a esta población. Por primera vez, además, porque si son ilegales, pues no tienen opciones de empleo digno. Asimismo, hemos venido trabajando con poner a disposición de esta población la formación en tecnologías TIC, en comercio electrónico, mirar nuevas formas de hacer las cosas, que tengan acceso a crédito, porque hay que darles, pero también hay que enseñarles a pescar, también con una filosofía de estudiar, y con esta filosofía de nunca es tarde, porque tenemos una población amplia entre los 30 años y los 50 años. Con la Secretaría de Educación nos dimos a la tarea de trabajar el bachillerato flexible. Con este modelo de atención integral hacia la protección social, estamos trabajando una ruta de atención hacia el ingreso, hacia el apoyo psicosocial, a crear redes de ayuda, no solamente con las entidades del gobierno distrital de Bogotá, sino también con las entidades del gobierno nacional. Estamos trabajando en una nueva plataforma que la estamos trabajando con la UCDE, es Orienta Pro, y esta plataforma nos va a permitir hacer una trazabilidad de esta población de la economía informal que está en el espacio público, para mitigar además el riesgo de que el vendedor informal no solamente es él, sino es su familia, y hay que mitigarlas haciendo una atención integral a él y a su familia, con programas de educación, con programas de emprendimiento, también con programas de vinculación a un empleo. Entonces, tenemos toda una estrategia y estamos ya ya vamos a entrar en la etapa de aplicación del modelo de atención integral hacia la protección social, e igualmente estamos en la etapa ya de la implementación de la herramienta para poder tener un seguimiento, un monitoreo y un learning, un aprendizaje de este monitoreo y este seguimiento con esta población en atención integral a él y a su familia. No sé cómo estamos de tiempo, sí.
I've taken my headphones off, so I'm going to say not any more time for the moment, but we can come back to Bogota. And I'm just reminded of what an extraordinarily rich and innovative city Bogota is in terms of the policy responses to such profound challenges as it has experienced over 10, 20, 30 years. There's always a good idea coming out of Bogota, and it's great to hear about it here. It's also very nice well, it's very important to remember that social protection is not just about moving cash from one group of people to another. It's also about the training, the integration of people, giving people a second chance in life, whether they be 19 or 50. And there's such a diverse range of instruments behind social protection that almost any risk is can be dealt with in some way through social protection, which is, I think, a big part of the universality justification for it. But when you're talking about the challenge of integration, the political challenges around social protection, there is perhaps, in my experience, the most extreme example is Indonesia, which is a country of 17,000 islands. Admittedly, only 6,000 to 8,000 of them are inhabited, but that's still quite a lot of people to take care of on a daily basis. Indonesia is, if you'll forgive me, a classic case of a country whose economy has performed very well over the past 20 years, and poverty declined dramatically, but at the same time, inequality rose for consistently over a 10 to 15 year period. And it is only recently that the inequality rate has started to decline again, and I think that's in large part because the government has made such a strong commitment to social protection. And we're very fortunate to have Durendra Wardner from Bappenas, the Indonesian Ministry of National Planning, who is a Deputy Director on Social Protection, who is here all the way from Jakarta and can tell us a bit about what Indonesia has achieved and how social protection has been key to that. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Alexander, for the generous introduction. It's really a pleasure and an honor for us to represent Indonesia to come to this wonderful event. Before I embark into the discussion of the social protection, inequality and poverty and the policies addressing this phenomenon, I would like to reiterate again what you already mentioned about the history of Indonesian economy. Basically, the concept or the notion of social protection just came into being in Indonesia not really long ago. It was just less than probably around 20 years back. As you mentioned, during 70s, 80s, our focus already encompassed the welfare improvement, economic development, and all that. But the way to achieve that at the time was through we call it broad brush development strategy, through the subsidy and through the assumption of a trickle down effect and all that. And after Asian financial crisis around in the mid-90s. We are aware that we need something to address. We need something to design. We call it at the time safety net programs. And afterwards, programs developed, become the origin of the social protection. We adopt, we copy, we modified lots of programs from Latin American countries like cash transfers, and we reduce the regressive subsidy we used to rely on in the past, and the progress was not that bad actually. Even during the global financial crisis in 2008, we still managed to reduce the poverty rate, the national poverty rate, until 15%. And for the first time in the history, last year, by 2018, we managed to reach a single-digit poverty rate. Using the national standard, probably approximately equal to 1.5 US dollar purchasing power parity. And as the slide shows, that in the right upper right, as we can see that if we are using the international standard, the gap is still large, and it implies or at least indicate that the vulnerability issues are in there. And also the map, the animated map shows that the poverty rates are focused on specific regions, particularly in the eastern part of Indonesia, in terms of proportion. And talking about absolute or nominal value is in Java, the center below island, where the most of the population resides. And next I will talk about inequality in if the slide can be changed into the next one. Yes, as Alexander mentioned, the inequality increases along the development as suggested in the development theory, Kuznets theory, and all that. And it's like a side effect of the development. Although basically in the past we experienced the low inequality could be referred to that we had shared poverty. So in terms of talking about lower inequality as a positive impression, actually in the past we are sharing the miserable situation, so to speak. And then along the way, with the community booms, with the development progression, the inequality increases. Until the last year, we managed to reduce it, although very incrementally, very insignificantly. And yes, as is reflected in the theory, the urban settings dominates or contributes the increasing of the inequality, and also probably similarly with the phenomenon of the poverty, the pockets or the regions of inequality are concentrated in areas where the commodity, where the natural resources are in there. We are not really sure if the correlation does make the causation, but the figures are in there. Probably in the next session I will talk about the policies and more coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the last of my esteemed panel is Koen Flemings, who is Director of Research and International Cooperation at the Belgian Federal Ministry of Social Affairs. And it goes on, but we don't have time. He's a very very influential and well-lettered man who is here today. He also has an extraordinarily broad range of working on social protection in developing countries in a range of capacities. And in your role, for example, in the Belgian Foreign Ministry and working particularly through SOCIEUX, what have you seen as do you have, for example, countries that have used social protection particularly effectively in reducing poverty and inequality?
Well, first of all, well, it was already mentioned before that social protection is a form of social investment. It's an investment in a better, productive and resilient economy. It's an investment in a better social fabric, more social cohesion. And the reason is because social protection, as we see in Belgium but also elsewhere, is social protection is key in reducing different kinds of inequality. And we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of social protection in Belgium this year. And during these 75 years, it has made our economy more resilient. For instance, we see that during the economic crisis, Belgium was more resilient because of social protection, because it creates a buffer against all kinds of shocks. And so it's, Belgium has a relatively low income inequality, but there are, of course, different other forms of inequality that need to be addressed. For instance, we have to work hard on the reintegration of immigrants. That's a challenge for Belgium. But, you know, like social protection, what I wanted to elaborate on is social protection addresses different kinds of inequality. It addresses vertical inequality. Of course, social assistance programs redistribute from the wealthier part of the population to the poorer parts of the population. And so, but not alone intergenerational, it's also about horizontal redistribution. You redistribute from the healthy to the sick. You redistribute from the young or the active to the elderly that are no longer able to work. You redistribute also from urban areas to rural areas, because if you have a national solidarity system within social insurance, you're also providing solidarity and redistribution across different regions of your country. And of course also about gender inequality and health inequalities. If you talk about health inequalities, for instance, we know that if you have low-income families that want to get ahead, and they all want to get ahead, at least they want to get ahead for their own sake, or they want their children to get ahead. So even if you have a careful strategy as a family, health problems can ruin it all. It can really put everything into jeopardy. And so accessible healthcare is really important if you want to give perspective to your low-income families and middle-income families, and to make a strategy to make progress, not only for themselves, but ultimately also for your economy and for your society. And so, well, I'm here with a double hat on. I'm Director of Research at the Belgian Ministry of Social Affairs, where I've been working hard on making our system more sustainable due to pension. We have a population aging. Many countries are confronted with population aging. So we have been working on pension reform and other challenges. And then we have been providing support to countries worldwide. And so you asked an example of a country where we had some success. We have, together with our partners of Expertise France, we have provided assistance to the People's Republic of China that wanted to, during the last 5 years, improve and modernize their social protection system and their employment policies. And so, for instance, one of the elements where we assisted was the introduction of and the improvement of the rural pension system, where you have not only a provision of a pension to people in the rural area, but of course it's also a form of redistribution between urban areas, richer urban areas, and rural areas, because these pensioners will spend their income in the local economy. And so the local economy gets stimulated. And so you see that there is more jobs locally, so people have less incentive to move to the cities and become migrant workers, which is a huge problem in China. So you see all kinds of benefits. And I'm also here as a representative of SOCIEUX. And so SOCIEUX is this technical assistance facility financed by the European Union and also by the partners, Expertise France, Spanish FIAP, and our Balinkosoc service in Belgium. And we are specialized in providing short-term expertise from European experts on a peer-to-peer basis. And we are focused on improving the capacities of other countries to design and implement sustainable social policies and labor market policies. And we do that because it's a demand-driven facility. So the initiative comes from partner countries, from administrations, from NGOs, And so it's on a peer-to-peer basis, so it's in a partnership. We exchange ideas and we try to, together with these partner countries who know their own needs best, we try to design, improve capacity in these countries by providing expertise. And we have done so in many ways that have an impact on inequality. We have worked on social assistance in Djibouti. We have made a list of all the different contributions that we made. For instance, many projects were related to redistribution from the richer to the poor, social assistance, but also intergenerational equality, pension systems, of course, but also improving youth employment. For instance, in Benin, we did that, an improvement of the youth employment services. We also try to address gender equality. We have employment to empower women in Peru. It was also a project. Of course, we also we addressed together with the partner country, we addressed accessible healthcare in multiple countries. For instance, in Zimbabwe, there's a clear example where we focused on accessible healthcare. We also worked on informal economy in Colombia. And also on the urban-rural divide. So a lot of work on migrant workers. So we have addressed through social protection, through SOCIEUX, we have assisted our partner countries in improving their capacity to implement social protection and employment policies that were more inclusive and also that were also more redistributive in creating more opportunities and also better outcomes in their own countries. And so the key messages that I have is like social protection is really vital if you want to have a good inclusive economy, and it's also beneficial because it will be a better productive economy and a more resilient economy, resilient to shocks. And secondly, for cooperation, and especially in the domain of social protection, partnership is vital. So it's not like we are preaching our experience of European countries to all these partner countries. No, we work together. And we had just had an audit, an external audit of SOCIEUX, with very good results, also very high appreciation by partner countries. We also had also good impact. We really made a difference through the provision of expertise. But also one of the results that what I liked a lot was these European experts coming from ministries, administrations and so on. They said they learned from their experience. So by participating in these projects and providing expertise to partner countries, they learned from experiences in these countries, new ideas, and they better understand their own system now, and they come back to their country with a better knowledge. So that's also a particular element that I liked a lot. So the partnership was really some element that I would also like to contribute.
Thank you very much. So this is you now have a sense of what our partners what our panelists rather are working on, and I'd like you to just think of some questions or a question you'd like to ask at this point. But while you're formulating some brilliant question, which hopefully will trip up or expose our panelists as the shameless frauds that they are, or indeed give them an opportunity to show their brilliance more than like. I would just like to take this opportunity to have one quick round of questions before we open it to the floor. In broad terms, I think probably everyone in the room, probably everyone on the panel recognizes the value and the impact and the importance of social protection. And yet we are at a point in time where we are constantly advocating for social protection. We are needing to get the message out. We need to make the business case. We need to persuade so many different people in so many different parts of different national administrations. And I'm not just talking about developing countries here. I'm talking about countries that are the very wealthiest countries, or the very those that are most developed. Often it is not necessarily easy to advocate for a new social protection program, which is especially challenging given that we're at a moment in time where things are very unclear, where things are very difficult around the world of work in terms of trends driven by technology or migration or changes in or demographics. And so we need to keep on innovating, keep on listening to each other to find out how we can address these challenges. But I suppose, and I don't want this to be a defeatist question, rather I'd like it to be a positive an opportunity. But if I could just ask the panelists for their thoughts as to why we are still fighting to make the case for social protection, and what you think is the best message to send out there, or the best example that we can give to the people we work with around the benefits of social protection. For no other reason than it's just convenient for me, I'm going to ask in exactly the same order as I asked the first. So Audrey, if you, what do you say to people who say that, or why do people tell you that social protection can't be done?
Thanks. Well, I think that we've been preaching a lot about social protection, and the development community is quite convinced now that this needs to be done. But it's not going to be done through development financing. ODA will never be enough to finance the system. So it's more a question of convincing the countries now that it needs to be done and that these investments need to be created. And for that, I mean, what is still missing in certain parts of the world is political will. And political will sometimes is there, but then there is all the question of the financing. And the financing, as all systems are different by nature, because they have to be totally adapted to the context, the financing need a lot of studies, and even the studies to really make sure that the financing is adequate and sustainable can be costly. So it's really a question of sharing expertise, such as what is SOCIEUX doing, and making sure that we provide this knowledge and these good lessons to the countries so that they can set themselves the system that they need, and they can be convinced that gradually it can be improved and increased further. So it's political will and showing how it can be done.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Teresa, you have been following the data, you've been producing new data that shows just how beneficial social protection is, but you also have the not straightforward message to communicate that social insurance and social assistance or universal benefits, they benefit different groups. They serve different purposes. One is about, perhaps not just about reducing poverty, but shifting consumption. What do you find most challenging to explain to people who look at your work for the first time, and what do you tell them?
Well,
Sorry.
sure. Oh, yes. I think that one of the main challenges lies in I would say in the informality of many economies in many middle and low-income countries. That, well, maybe it then goes back to the issue of financing. Countries with large informal sectors, obviously for them it's extremely difficult to find appropriate ways of financing social security. And I guess that this is the part where it's hardest to convince that social protection is the answer to problems of inequality and poverty in many countries, I guess.
Great, thank you very much. And that and leads us nicely back to Gladys, the challenge of informality in terms of extending social protection, and it's something that is important for Indonesia as well. But Gladys, in a country like Colombia, in a city like Bogota, which faces so many different challenges, seemingly all at the same time, how do you keep on, how do you make the case for social protection and for investing in training and for investing in entrepreneurship when there are competing priorities for the city?
Bueno, aquí yo quiero dejar digamos, una frase que es importante, teniendo en cuenta que la política de protección social es fundamental para reducir la pobreza, reducir la desigualdad y tener una protección más inclusiva, es necesario que trabajemos en modelos y en políticas con marcos normativos que refuercen el avance en la protección social universal a población altamente vulnerable. En Bogotá tenemos una población con un 80% de vulnerabilidad con sus familias que recurren al espacio público. Desde Bogotá ya lo estamos haciendo con SOCIEUX, hemos trabajado un modelo de atención, trabajamos hacia esa implementación de ese modelo de atención integral al vendedor informal y a su familia, pero se requiere que a nivel del mundo avancemos en la política de protección social para esta economía informal que recurre al espacio público como una forma de sustento.
Thank you very much. And finally, Dhirendra, what has been, or what was, in your opinion perhaps, this is not an easy question, but politically, what was it that gave the impetus to social protection in Indonesia?
Well, of course, the most obvious answer is on the constitution. The normative objectives are in there. You know, the high, very positive goals are already stipulated in the laws. Probably similar in the other countries as well. But I showed you previously in the slide that we are not finished with the problems. Once we thought that we are done with the poverty, we are witnessing that the vulnerability still in there, and inequality as the excess or the side effects of the developments are not really answered yet. And I would like to share that the differences between that requires the never-ending social protection or evolving and enhancement of the social protection programs. And I would like to share a little bit about the differences between the anti-poverty programs and probably so to speak anti-inequality program. Both are the resultants of many policies or the situations in the relevant countries. But in our experience, when we would like to reduce the poverty rate, the critics always accuses that the government does the cheat. The cheat is like we throw the social policies before the periods of surveys, social welfare surveys in certain periods, like for instance February and August. So around January and July, we threw a lot of money, cash transfers, and really variety of many programs, and that is really effective to reduce the poverty rate. Whilst for the inequality is not really the case. The different lots of programs, lots of investment, social investment, could not really be reflected in the decrease of the inequality. Proven with the latest data showed that only very incremental decrease of the Gini coefficient, which indicates the, as you mentioned, the impetus or the background to keep revising, keep developing the social protection. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And finally, I mean, you already touched on a lot of the challenges around, or rather how social protection is fundamental to meeting all these challenges. From the perspective of someone working in development cooperation, how do you experience the interaction between yourself and between a partner government which might not see a way of sustaining a social protection program once the development cooperation, once the ODA starts to diminish?
From my concrete experience, but you have two pitfalls. You have often one pitfall is that they say, like, it's a luxury, we don't have the resources to do this, and we have better things, we have to invest in all kinds of infrastructure and so on. And it's often the point of view of a Ministry of Finance, and in Belgium and elsewhere. But then you have to convince them that it's also social investment is also a valid investment, and that it's positive for their, not only for their economic productivity, the resilience of their economy, the social fabric, social cohesion, political stability. So it's also a form of investment, and you can really engage them and show this with, for instance, with the. We have within 3 weeks we have a delegation of the People's Republic of China, Ministry of Finance, coming over, and we will show them with concrete results and empirical research to show our points. A second pitfall is that they have resources, but they prefer to give it to the powerful groups, and that can be civil servants or anyway. So sometimes you have very developed systems of insurance for specific groups, and so it's not. So you have to also have a more global strategy for social protection in your country. Develop and see like where is it really important, where does it make a difference that we invest. I mentioned health inequalities, accessible healthcare, very important. You can really do a lot of good by investing in accessible healthcare and making, so like I said, making families more resilient. Second thing is like creating better environments for families with children, so that these children have the possibility to go follow education. They grow up, that their cognitive skills are developed in the best environment possible. And so they will perform well at school, and they have more chances in the labor market, and they will contribute to your economy. So you have to have a really balanced, it's worthwhile to have a balanced strategy for social protection and employment policies, to see it from a social investment perspective. So like really contributing to the improvement of the economy and the social fabric in a country. And there's ample evidence to make a case for that. But it's of course, it's a third element maybe that I could mention, and then I'll stop about it. The third element is like, okay, it's top-down sometimes, but that's a bit like social engineering. It's also important to see national resources that they are well redistributed, but you've also often bottom-up developments in social protection, like mutualism and groups of people that, and like in examples of microcredits in India and elsewhere, and it happened in European countries as well. So you see these bottom-up approaches, because that's in essence it's also about solidarity, and sometimes it can be solidarity be within a specific rural community or a professional group. And you can see also bottom-up, and then often you see that when these bottom-up initiatives are successful, that you see that others will also start contributing to it, municipal governments, central governments, and so on. So bottom-up approaches are also important. So social protection is all about partnership. That's in essence, and if you work in partnership for a good strategy, you can find the resources to really invest in what you need to invest to.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the opportunity to see if there are any questions from the floor. I see two. I'll take. That's great. I see 4 questions, which will be very nice. If you'd like to select a panelist to answer it, that would be great. But so I will just move left to right, actually. So, gentleman at the back. Thank you very much.
Good evening and thank you. My name is Hussein from Kenya. I'm handling a social assistance program called Hunger Safety Net program. My question is to Madam Mary. We have a program which is social assistance, and we have made it a bit flexible so that it is able to respond to environmental shocks. So we are able to scale it, expand, and contract it. However, from Bogota, you have sudden influx of refugees. You have possibly reintegration of combatants into the town. How does your social protection be able to expand and contract based on these influxes? Because I'm interested, from the other one is very much easy, from drought, it's environmental. What socioeconomic indicators do you use to expand and contract based on this? I'll really be interested in that. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Kees Terwan. I'm here on behalf of the Dutch government. I would like to pose a question to the ILO, to Ms. Le Gouvel. My question is the ILO considering of having a new convention specifically on universal social protection as some sort of a follow-up to the recommendation from 2012? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Clara. I'm from Development Pathways, a fellow advocate for universal social protection. I just wanted to know how you've gone about convincing governments in the need or the benefit of a universal social protection program when a lot of governments are still using the rhetoric of poverty targeting or poverty-related protection programs. So I just wanted to know how you would go about, or how you have gone about convincing them, or for the governmental representatives, what made you be convinced about a universal social protection program?
Hello, I'm Nadia Giske, and I'm an independent consultant. This is directed at Mr. Vleminix. Apologies for mispronunciation. Vlemix, thank you. I'm interested to know, in the Sahel, where we have, where there are many remote villages, where there is no infrastructure, you know, people are perhaps fortunate, you know, if they've got water, they might have to walk, you know, several hours through the desert. Yet these are often the most vulnerable people, and I'm particularly thinking now, for example, of Darfur, or other regions in the Sahel where we might find similar conditions, which are also conflict affected. Listening to what you would say, I mean, this mutualism and the bottom-up approach would be, that makes sense, but are there other examples, for example, in the Sahel, where social protection in whatever form has been rolled out in such remote locations, and how is that done when one considers the vast distances, the logistical challenges, issues of monitoring and evaluation? Is it very much reliant on people going to the nearest town? I'd be interested to perhaps be directed to some experiences relevant to that, and also perhaps where you have an economy that looks a bit like Venezuela, how you might roll out cash transfers.
Well, if you... no, because, well, if you're really focusing on communities in need, and so that are really under stress and under strain because of food shortages and so on, of course you first have to address these basic needs, and that's more a matter of national and international solidarity than work of a social protection system. But once you have communities that are doing relatively fine, you can start to address issues of mutual insurance, social protection. For instance, this specific example of communities in India where they used to be interested in life insurance, because if the breadwinner of the family dies, it puts everybody in jeopardy. And so they were interested in contributing to this life insurance. But then there was an idea to combine this with retirement insurance, when you could do it also for other forms of insurance and so on. And then you see that people, especially that people start to contribute to these schemes as soon as they are convinced that it's something that could be useful to them, and in a limited way, if they are contributing together in this kind of mutual insurance schemes, where you have some further assistance by a provincial government and so on, that could really start building up. Even in low-income communities, you could develop these kind of mutual insurance programs. But of course, if you are facing regions or communities that are really under acute stress, you first have to address this acute stress, the causes for it, and provide solidarity for it.
I'm sorry. No, because we've only got less than 10 minutes, but we can sort of pick that up, I think, immediately afterwards. I love that question from Kenya. You know, it's only drought. It's really easy to figure out how to extend the HSNP every year, depending on how much rain there is and how many people might be affected. The most modest question I think I've ever heard asked of a panelist. But thank you very much. And Gladys, can you talk about how you reach the people who really need to be reached in Bogota when the situation changes so rapidly?
Bueno, primero, de pronto Bogotá no tiene tan flexible ese modelo como lo tienen ustedes y sería bueno e interesante revisarlo, pero nosotros tenemos en Bogotá una institución que es la Alta Consejería para las Víctimas y en Colombia la Alta Consejería para la Reintegración, y trabajamos con otros organismos de nivel nacional como Migración Colombia, tenemos entidades como Secretaría de Atención Integral hacia el Bienestar de Población Vulnerable, y tenemos diferentes entidades también que se encargan de trabajar en una red de acompañamiento psicosocial, de llevar un sistema de información. Por eso nosotros hoy sabemos, en esa articulación entre el gobierno distrital y nacional, que han llegado más de 1.200.000 de migrantes venezolanos a Colombia y cerca de un 22% a Bogotá. Y frente a la migración de Venezuela, ¿qué estamos haciendo? Primero, garantizar el derecho a la educación, a la salud, a la parte nutricional para los niños, trabajar de la mano con el gobierno nacional para legalizar estos migrantes, para poder trabajar con ellos para acceso a empleo decente y a vivienda, pues porque digamos es una problemática que está viviendo hoy el país. Y frente a nuestros reintegrados por el proceso de paz y víctimas del conflicto armado, hay una red de atención integral, por eso tenemos indicadores que cerca de 8 millones de personas que han sido víctimas del conflicto armado en Colombia, cerca de 800.774 han llegado a Bogotá. Entonces hemos trabajado en una red de apoyo, de atención integral, psicosocial, garantizando el derecho a la educación, a la salud, a la vivienda. En ese proceso estamos para dar una atención a estas familias para que se puedan vincular a un empleo digno, para que puedan tener vivienda. Con el gobierno nacional también se ha trabajado el tema de restitución de tierras, y es que estas víctimas del conflicto armado puedan volver a sus hogares de origen. Estamos trabajando el emprendimiento para fortalecer sus unidades productivas, para que puedan adaptarse otra vez a la sociedad, haciendo pactos por el emprendimiento también con el sector privado, porque indudablemente, y creemos que tanto tenemos que vincular actores públicos, privados, políticos y diferentes organismos de nivel nacional e internacional para abordar esta problemática en Colombia.
Excellent, thank you very much. Now quite an easy question, actually. I mean, I'm sure very, very difficult politically, but it's just a sort of a yes or no answer, really. So the Convention on Universal Social Protection, Audrey, how is multilateral collaboration on social protection going to look in the next 20 years?
I mean, First of all, it's not up to the ILO to propose a convention. It's up to its 187 member states to propose it. And if I'm sure you followed the discussion leading to the recommendation in 2012, this is not an easy discussion. And there needs to be a momentum, and there needs to be some kind of environment whereby member states and including workers and employers can find a consensus around a framework. I'm not sure we're there yet. I'm not sure there is an appetite for a new binding instrument. So for the moment, for the ILO, it's more a question of ratifying, implementing the ongoing conventions. But I mean, if there would be one on a very personal basis, I would be thrilled working on it.
Excellent answer. Okay, so the fourth question, the third question, but the last one I'm going to address is A, because it's a very good question, and B, because it's a very nice way to wrap up this session. So, because we've talked a lot about social protection as a whole, but not specifically about so much about universalism and how to really expound. There's a word in there and I've lost it, and it's in English. How to emphasize the benefits of a universal approach to social protection. So I would like to give each of our panelists 30 seconds to just say, why universal approach to social protection, and with that, I will close the session. Starting with Dhirendra.
Why universal? This is a pertinent question, but in our case, we interpret or we define the universal means that different types of policies for different groups. So it means that the cash transfer is only entitled for the lowest 10%, and another policies like village fund for the 30 or 40 percentiles. And the ones that is really universal is social health insurance, which is actually contributory in nature, but it is subsidized for the lowest 40 percentile. So with this reinterpretation or the definition of universal means that there are no one policies for every single group.
Gladys?
Bueno, como todos sabemos, la informalidad en el mundo es una problemática crítica. Máxime si hay familias que recurren al espacio público para tener un sustento. Por eso necesitamos avanzar en la protección social universal con unas políticas que promuevan y disminuyan tanto la pobreza, la desigualdad, que haya una mayor equidad además en la redistribución de los ingresos y que podamos incluir a esta población con una atención integral que permita crecimiento, desarrollo económico y prosperidad.
Well, for the ILO, it's linking to the 2030 agenda, and if this agenda is about leaving no one behind, I think that everybody should be given the opportunity to participate in society, economic participation, but also social protection, sorry, and for me, universal social protection is all about that.
Yes, I think there's not much more to say. I mean, as the word says, universal benefits are good just because they are universal. They touch upon every single percentile of the income distribution.
I agree with the previous speakers, but let me add that it's also a universal social protection system is also more effective. If you are talking about more productive and resilient economies, you can achieve that through a universal social protection. So not by providing only social assistance to the poor, or just by providing social insurance to privileged groups in society. Universal social protection will help you achieve that agenda of social investment and productive and resilient economies.
And with that, I close this session. Thank you very much to all our panelists. I'd like to give a... And thank you to the audience, and thank you to Adriana and SOCIEUX, and to everyone who's been involved in organizing, and to the organizers of EDD themselves. This has been a wonderful opportunity, and thank you very much.